Let's build a new national sense of unity, of common purpose and positivity. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again, the moment we bring back hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
Andy Burnham has just become the new Prime Minister of Britain. He's arrived in Downing Street, done a statement to the nation, surrounded by loads of friends, family and supporters, and he's made some huge promises, a new political and economic model for Britain, starting on day one with his pledge to end rough sleeping. He now goes into the famous black door, gets down to work, and we will try and work out what it all means and what clues we've been able to glean on this episode of Newscast, coming to you from Downing Street. Hello, it's Adam, not in the Newscast studio, but in Downing Street.
And it's Laura in Downing Street.
And it's Faisal in Downing Street too.
Why would we be here today?
Well, it's not Sunday.
It's not Saturday.
But it's good to be reunited anyway.
Always.
Loads to discuss actually, and I think maybe more to discuss than you would have in your typical new Prime Minister coming in saying things in Downing Street. I think we got kind of more clues and more sort of change of direction from Andy Burnham today than maybe we've had in the past from these moments. Maybe let's just save that for later. Do you know what? That's my theory blown. I just saw your facial reaction to that theory, but never mind.
Well, I didn't know if we were going to start on some of the changes that were definitely there, which were changes in style. So no script, no lectern. He was sort of, that I'm going to be a bit less formal. It was still a big formal speech, wasn't it? But much more off the cuff. No script, no lectern. But he did, many people will be relieved to know, still have a shirt and tie on to meet the King and then to talk to the country for the first time.
And he had incredibly sharp cuffs, I noticed, in his shirt. Faisal, you were watching it all happening as well.
I was perilously close to him.
Okay. I thought it felt a bit more like a family wedding than these things normally feel, because he spent ages shaking hands with all his friends and supporters, and there was little children around and their party dresses and stuff. It felt just much more relaxed than these great state occasions often are.
You got that sense of a shift of power, and of course the Prime Minister changes, but actually seeing some of the faces that I have seen from my hometown suddenly become the people running the country. There was Caroline Simpson, who who used to run the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Now we think she's going to be in charge of Number 10 in the North. Steve Rotherham, who's co-author of the now Prime Minister, and probably somebody who is going to, if you want to test the temperature of where Downing Street's going, I think he was the guy on the Monday that he gets appointed. He went for a drink with Steve Rotherham, right?
Yeah.
So
and Steve Rotherham was here with his grandchild.
Harley, new
Peter
baby.
Reid, the ex-Everton player-manager, I think it's fair to say. That was a surprise. And various other figures from his Manchester years were here. But I thought what I took from the lectern moment, exactly as Laura said...
The no lectern moment.
The no lectern moment. Well, exactly. The lack of lectern was that... He's trying to communicate a couple of things, which is he's different, number one, but number two, that slightly niche and nerdy policy agenda on devolution and decentralisation, which I think it's fair to say is not in the top 10 of the polls in terms of what people have cared about. He memorised that stuff. He dreams of it probably, right? He's written books about it, feels utterly comfortable in giving an off-the-cuff speech at a very important moment on that agenda.
And I think that's interesting because there are politicians who, when you speak to them and when you hear them in front of microphones, sound completely different to what they sound like when you talk to them in private. Then there are some politicians, and Andy Burnham is one of them, who actually talks like that when you chat to him in private. Now, he might also talk in even less formally than that, but these are his lines, right? Yeah. They are not, a speechwriter has spent 3 weeks sweating and late nights coming up with the formal podium speech for Downing Street. Those are his lines, right? Point scoring, problem solving instead of point scoring, people instead of party, all of these things, those are his lines. I think what's also worth saying, what he's saying is, we took wrong turns as a country 4 decades ago. That's all now going to change. We're going to take a different change of direction. We were talking about this at the weekend, but just that is, in some ways, just not consistent with what she's also said, is I'm going to stick to what you as a country voted for in 2024.
The Labour manifesto,
And I think we just don't know yet how genuinely different Andy Burnham is going to try to be in terms of switching policies, right? We know he's probably going to do things maxing out the ability to drill for oil and gas in the North Sea without ditching the Labour manifesto commitment. Yeah. We know he's interested in unfreezing the tax rate thresholds, essentially to give people a tax cut. We know his first pledge today was, I'm going to end rough sleeping. But there are just such an awfully long list of other things. We just don't know which way he's going to go. We know what he believes, but that's so different to being able to be sure what he'll decide.
Well, honestly, he made some huge pledges there this morning. So a new political model and a new economic model for the country. It's like, aren't those the sort of things that happen over tens of years rather than a couple of years?
But he also said, I'll be back in a few months with a 10-year plan.
Later this year, I will bring forward a new plan for Britain, a 10-year plan, laying out a path from where we are now to where I believe we all want Britain to be, wherever we're coming from, whatever party we support. But I can do something to give people some breathing space now, some help with the cost of living. And I will set out some of those measures starting tomorrow, including how we pay for them.
I thought, so is he going to try and get through a few months without saying very much at all?
Yeah, I thought that too.
Possibly. Twitch.
Well, we did get that clear indication that tomorrow we will get some sort of cost of living help, maybe that threshold announcement. That is if they were to do that immediately.
And he said, and how to pay for it.
Yeah.
So just
they might do that. They need a big moment. They need a big moment to actually match the scale of the rhetoric.
So there's just a few things there. So one of the things he said he will do this week is tomorrow, cost of living help, which he described as giving people some breathing room. And he also said how we'll pay for it. Yeah. So to me that sounds like a temporary thing to help with bills in some way, with the potential temporary tax increase to pay for it, or a spending cut in something else as soon as tomorrow.
Is if it helps more than 10 million people and costs more than a few £100s, it's billions and billions, and that's just the basic. So if it's to register on any sort of cost of living Richter scale that's going to affect anybody, it's going to cost a significant amount, and therefore the compensatory way that you fund it is going to be really controversial in terms of, I don't know, the business community, corporation tax, capital gains tax,
and it sounds already think that they pay far too much tax, and there are many millions of those people in this country too.
And it sounds like. It sounds like a sort of mini-ish budget. Now, he did say in the interview with the Times this morning that yesterday he was in the Treasury. I mean,
talking about a few things.
Yeah.
He said.
So that's where that goes, and I think he would imagine that the 10-year plan helps the economy to grow. But in terms of getting the numbers to add up, to get to the Office of Budget Responsibility to get the numbers to add up, it's quite difficult to get them to get credit for that.
That promise of a 10-year plan for the country later this year gave me even more ammo for my theory that he's going to stick to the fiscal rules but make them over 10 years rather than 5.
Well, that might be interesting,
But maybe that's just my confirmation bias, looking for evidence to match my theory.
Well, also, if he unfreezes tax rate thresholds, then we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. So we're like, he's definitely going to do that because we predicted it at the weekend a fortnight ago. But the unions have been pushing for that. We know the unions, after all the jiggery-pokery, did pretty much all back Andy Burnham to go forward. This is politics. Whatever the milk and honey will flow from the taps of the land, he has been talking to unions, Labour politicians, Labour figures in the last couple of months about what he's going to do for them, right? So the horse trading is real. He's a very, very powerful Prime Minister in this moment, but the rubber's going to hit the road. To mix all of my metaphors, it's going to be very difficult. And one of his friends was saying to me a couple of weeks ago, look, he knows this is going to be very, very difficult from the get-go. But I think it is going to be difficult, but it is also, whatever happens, it's going to be very different political atmosphere for the country, because he's such a different figure to Starmer, like for good or for ill. It's going to look and feel so different.
Can I just interrupt, because a little bit of Westminster lore has just happened. Tobias, known on social media by a very objectifying name as Hot Podium Guy, has just been kneeling down beside us to unplug some wires, and also his job is changing now because there was no podium today.
Well, I dare you to ask him if he's gutted that the lectern's gone, because his job's now changed. But that would be putting him on the spot.
Get on with his trade. Right. I don't think he sought the limelight.
It's just worth unpacking something that Laura said there, which is I think that the optimism and hope part of it, whether you buy into it or you don't buy into it, the presence of it is significant.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable, and I think it was fully acknowledged by the now gone administration of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, that to come in here and within 2 months have that sort of dour press conference and tell everyone pain is to come. You know, even a tough budget shouldn't actually be painful for the whole swathe of the population, right? You know, it should eventually lead to good things. So that was an astonishing, and they fully recognised that was a mistake within 3 months. That is not the vibe, obviously, coming out of Andy Burnham, and that is an important part of what he wants. We've talked in the past on Newscast about, like, there's funny stuff going on with consumer confidence. There's very high levels of savings. People have been sort of nervous. They've been afflicted by 10 years of political and economic crisis. And 2 years ago, the misjudgment made by the Starmer Reeves administration was to think they wanted to hear more about pain and blame and all that sort of stuff. And so I think that will be quite a substantial difference, although not a policy difference. He will try and sound positive, there's a future, and that is where the 10-year plan probably fits in, a sense of direction.
And that's politics, right? So as you rightly say, you know, if he sticks to the rhetoric of some of the things, or if some of his actions match the rhetoric, it might be really, really, really expensive. However, you can't put a price on cheering people up.
Yeah.
Politics is about policy, it's about money, it's about tax and borrowing and being responsible and all of those things which are vitally important. And there is great scepticism in some pockets of the Labour Party that he'll be able to do it, right? We should also say that. However, the ability to make people feel good is a basic skill for effective politicians. And to take people with you, and even if something's going to be hard, is to give them a compelling reason why they should do it, right? Why is it nobody wants to get up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, but you can be persuaded, I'm sure, Adam, to do it every now and again because you might think, oh well, I'm going to get into my shorts next week, you know. And that persuasion point is something that Keir Starmer really struggled with. His detractors would say it was partly because he didn't really care about it that much. He didn't see that as important, and he ran that place as kind of, well, I'm going to make this decision. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm a serious, capable person, which he is.
And that would be enough.
And that would be enough. Whereas the sort of feel-good, the razzle-dazzle of politics, which Andy Burnham loves, and he's good at it. I think Downing Street staff are going to have to start building in an extra hour on every single visit they do.
Shake hands.
Because he's going to try and shake hands with every single person in the country.
And that's what's interesting, because and I was really struck by when he arrived and he absolutely took his time working up the street and then gave his mum a huge big hug and he was like fist bumping the children. He was not in a rush to give all of us here, the assembled media, the speech for us to then dissect. And he was in the sunshine. And he was doing like the pray hands emoji, and I wonder but will that transmit through the TV pictures tonight in Chris's piece on the 6 o'clock news, or will people just go, oh, he's trying to aid Tony Blair in 1997, where he walked down the street shaking people's hands, and it turns out they weren't ordinary voters, they were Labour Party staffers.
Look,
like, does it work that quickly?
I think there's a window where people are going to be willing to look at the Labour Party again. Not everyone, but some people. That's what the polling suggests. And Andy Burnham, don't forget, the reason he's in there is if you look at polling, he is in an era when the public basically detests politics as an entity, as a sort of body, as in they do not like politicians. He is a politician who has had incredibly positive personality ratings, and I'm afraid it might sound distasteful, that really matters. That's why he's there, is because his party decided that he was potentially a winner for them in the UK because Keir Starmer looked like a loser. It's not because the Labour Party suddenly woke up one day and thought, oh, Andy Burnham's got the best prospectus for the country, he's going to be amazing at running everything, he would be wonderful. It's because he looks like a winner.
I think for me one of the key judgments is this overlap between the extent to which he can pursue what he actually wants to do within the confines of the 2024 manifesto, when we know there's a whole sweep of things in the economy, actually constitutionally as well, which he really does want to do around electoral reform, around House of Lords. I mean, you guys tell me, like, it's in how much of that makes it into the 10-year plan that will work out, I think, how quickly an election will happen and whether he needs his own mandate.
And how many other things he might ditch. So that's why the digital ID cards thing was interesting at the weekend. Is like, that's something that wasn't in the manifesto, people weren't really that up for it. Just get rid of it. Might there be other things this week that they go, you know what, and the country's in a proper kip, let's just not focus on things that aren't important. But then the devolution agenda, he really cares about that. As you said, that's not important to most people. So if you're going to do that, it's really, there's quite a lot of contradictions.
Sorry, I'm
trying to hold
punching the air. That's how the good vibes in Downing Street. They are transmitting already. And that's the ID cards thing, because it then emerged actually not very much money had been allocated to that programme anyway.
Billion.
So but it actually allocated and to be spent in the short term.
Yeah, but still it was.
So it's not like he
1.6
saved
billion
loads of money today by accident.
What we're going to get is this 10-year plan is going to be a Let's Rebuild Britain plan. And it'll be designed to say all the stuff that's gone wrong that you see in your communities, that you see in the transport infrastructure, that you see, we're going to get all that sorted. Now that costs money, right? But that and by the way, you can make decisions about this closer to home. So that's the rough contours of what he is, I think, going to try and deliver. And you will see, I think, people like Jim O'Neill, the former Treasury Minister, like he's been trying to deliver this. It's a story that's not quite cross-party, right? Yeah. It starts actually before George Osborne. George Osborne had a big part in it. Michael Heseltine, Lord Adonis did a bit of this. You kind of go all the way through this, and I think he does have a challenge in making sure everybody thinks it applies not just to the north of England,
yes,
and it applies to Cornwall and the West Country. I know in the polling that he was doing much better in the north, but in the Thames Estuary, it's not going down.
And also, Laura, you had that great moment on your show on Sunday where Tracy Brabin, Mayor of West Yorkshire, said number 10 North is going to change things. Kate Garraway, presenter of Good Morning Britain, said, our listeners and viewers are not that bothered by that. And then Tracy Brabin said, typical Southerner. And there was a real moment of tension between them.
It's real though, isn't it? But I think what Andy Burnham actually is trying to get at is not north-south. I think it's London and everyone else, right? Or London, wealthy suburban central London. There's lots of pockets of poverty in the southeast of England. Absolutely, some of the poorest bits of the country are in central London, but I think that's kind of what they're trying to get at. But one thing, just listening to you talk there about the agenda, it's worth reminding everyone, that's the agenda also that Keir Starmer had. That's the agenda that Boris Johnson had in terms of levelling up. The extent to which, how far Andy Burnham wants to go, but I think it might be the case that there's some quite technical things they can do behind the scenes without really changing very much. So someone was explaining to me a couple of weeks ago, one of the problems with not just with the levelling up money, which was the Conservatives' way of doing this, but with some of the devolution money that has come when Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves were here, was that Whitehall was setting so many rules on how it ought to be spent that it was taking a hell of a long time, and basically so the money was sitting there in pots, but they weren't able to spend it. Now, if they could say, forget about the rules, or we should just explain to Newscast, this is Her Majesty's press lobby, just coming out from a briefing. Here's our very own Chris Mason.
Walking behind us is all the political journalists that you read in the papers every day.
Any stories?
And so Chris, I think you're going to go and use that orange microphone next to Faisal. Two things have happened. So first of all, this morning there was an exclusion zone outside Downing Street for people with megaphones. So you would not have a repeat of what happened to Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, where a famous protester called Steve Bray played music very loudly at grand state occasions like Prime Ministers arriving or resigning.
Yeah, and when we were trying to do the news back in the day, hopefully.
I think that order has now ended because there's somebody making loads of noise at Downing Street. So you'll be able to hear them in the background of this episode of Newscast. The second thing that's happened is all the nation's finest political journalists were in the Downing Street garden getting a lobby briefing from the Prime Minister's team. One of them was Chris Mason, and so he joins us now.
Hi.
Did you have school in the back garden today?
Well, yes, we were escorted out of the back gates of Downing Street and around the corner and through a little gate into the garden. and we were allowed to keep hold of our phones, which is a very rare thing.
Because normally you have to put them in a little cupboard.
Downing Street, and it was the Prime Minister himself who did the briefing.
Wow.
Just for a handful of minutes, not particularly long.
Loves a
There
chat.
might be something a little later in the week, and so he called us in for a chat. It's that doing that weird thing of adjusting to calling somebody else Prime Minister.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's quite odd, really.
Which
It
just
takes
happens
a
in the
little
space of
while.
an hour.
Yeah,
The
totally.
change
Yeah,
over. Chris, not to go over old ground, but we did our sort of like theatrical review of the event of him arriving in Downing
Did you
Street.
now?
Larry
Right.
the cat is now doing his version of it as well, of course. What was your take on just like the vibe? I mean, it was a beautiful sunny morning. He was looking like he was enjoying himself, and he was surrounded by friends and family, and little children who dressed up for the day.
Yeah, they're big moments, aren't they? And I think the thing is, because it's happened with the frequency that it has in recent years, we shouldn't forget how big a moment it is and how big an opportunity for a party between a general election to attempt a reset. And then the human reality of a moment like this. So you saw the semicircle of Keir Starmer's supporters and friends and family gathered with a sense of pride, but ultimately a demeanour of disappointment and failure, frankly, because that's how it's turned out relative to how they would have imagined it just 2 years ago. And then seeing Andy Burnham's equivalent semicircle of supporters either side of the doorway. There was Steve Rotherham there, the Mayor of the Liverpool City region, with his newly arrived grandchild in arm.
As revealed on Friday's newscast.
Well, indeed. There was Dale Vince with his T-shirt about chips being vegan.
The
if I
eco-investor.
if I read his T-shirt correctly, and Andy Burnham's mum in amongst the crowd. So yeah, that real sense, and there was a sense of that from the briefing I've just been in, of the gravity of the human moment of somebody becoming Prime Minister. And you imagine, we were just thinking this as a gathered press pack in the garden just a few minutes ago, you imagine the conversations that the Prime Minister has had between the moment in the streets at just before 1 o'clock, and right now at, just gone 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
The gravity of those conversations around national security.
Kind of like, here's the nuclear codes kind of stuff.
All of that, exactly.
Yeah,
and the responsibilities that suddenly crash on the shoulders of an incoming Prime Minister, with all of the decisions still to take as the afternoon rolls on.
Important question, had Andy Burnham taken his tie off in between going into the front door and speaking to you?
He was as formally dressed, addressing the scruffy press pack in the garden without any cameras. He was as formally dressed, so not only the suit, even the button done. I mean, I thought this is a whole new level of
You just hadn't had
formality.
time to do the Manchester look. It's funny hearing you saying about the Starmer supporters leaving and the Burnham supporters arriving, because I was queuing to get in, because I turned up much later than you guys did, because I'm a part-timer now, and there was a huge queue of journalists to get in, and the police were having to get the Starmer supporters in from the back of the queue and say to the Burnham supporters, sorry, you've just got to wait, your slot isn't until 12.
So I got stuck in the queue with some of Keir Starmer's friends coming in, and they were actually one of them, and I'm not going to betray it, but one of them was really, really furious about what's happened. And for all that, as you said, it's a bit sort of family wedding vibes. Labour had a great time on Friday, didn't they, at that event? Chris had a great time here in the street today. There are
wounds.
There are wounds. Now, it is very true that they have managed to avoid what happened with all the Tory transitions, which is basically, with the people were cleaning up the metaphorical blood off the floor. They were bitter, and it kind of got worse every time, didn't it? The level of kind of poison that was left behind, and they were very, very factional each time. Andy Burnham and his team, they've managed, broadly speaking, to avoid that. There is a lot of goodwill, so there are pockets of unhappiness, but my God, it might disappear so quickly, and I'm not predicting that, and it's a remarkable achievement to have got this far without bigger bust-ups.
It could happen tomorrow, right? It could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
If we talked about this sort of giveaway with some sort of takeaway.
Yeah.
This was the point at which things started to go south for Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer when they decided to cut the winter fuel allowance, and you're like, that one misjudgment right now tonight by the new Chancellor.
Yeah.
Could define
Also,
everything.
just thinking back to the queue, I was just chatting to people there, and where have you come from? How do you know Andy? And I met the guy that runs the Working Man's Club, which was his HQ for the
in
Makerfield
Makefield.
by-election.
Yeah.
Where a pint is £3.50.
Great.
I was like, wait to try and have one round here.
That expensive.
Chris, just in terms of actual details, because we've talked a lot about Andy Burnham's got this big vision and there's not a lot of detail about how it's going to be worked out. We do have one quite worked out policy, I'm saying policy, but it's a pledge to eliminate rough sleeping. So he said at the end of his speech at the Not podium, the first instruction I'm going to give when I go in through this famous door is to tell all my officials my priority today is ending rough sleeping across the UK. And we've learned a bit more detail about how that's going to work.
Yeah, and not only that as a kind of headline promise delivered in that opening address, but he went out at the crack of dawn this morning with a camera in tow and a journalist acting on behalf of all of us. It was our colleague Beth Rigby from Sky News, talking to people who are rough sleepers, going to a homeless shelter. Clearly this is something he's passionate about, a policy that he has attempted to pursue as Mayor of Greater Manchester. But I think it also sits in that wider thing of how he wants to be perceived as Prime Minister, that this is, as he would hope to be seen, a sort of pavement politician who now happens to be Prime Minister, rather than the other way around.
And when you read the small print, because it's now the first government press release of the Burnham era, is this rough sleeping pledge. And basically, well, you've been off working, I could just look at my phone all afternoon. It's basically 340 million of extra money from the Communities Department that hadn't been spent, that is now being added to the several billions already committed in the government's existing homelessness strategy.
See, so that's about getting money out the door. But here's another thing. So this was one of Andy Burnham's big promises in Greater Manchester, and he didn't achieve it. So what his team would say is, we made a lot of progress on rough sleeping in Manchester, and then we were undermined, as they would see it, by the Conservative government's decision to start moving asylum seekers out of hotels or whatever. You know, they basically say central government made it impossible.
There wasn't the accommodation to put rough sleepers into.
So Andy Burnham has tried this in Greater Manchester with mixed results. So yes, we're going to hear a lot, and he's going to say, I really believe in this thing, I really want to do it, as ever. And in the coming months, we'll also be looking at the small print.
So I asked him about housing when I interviewed him 4 or 5 months ago. And what was quite interesting about that was that one of the answers was we need more funding from central government, right? And we need more powers. Well, he's in charge of that now.
Yeah.
He's got the powers,
Well, definitely. But then the other thing he said was we need to build more. Well, Manchester is now building more council houses. It's not a huge amount, to be honest. And now that's one of the agendas that he has pushed, which is a record amount of council house building. How long is that going to take to have any actual impact on the policy agenda? A lot of his policy agendas are long-term. So you have this sort of time inconsistency with the sorts of solutions that he tends to talk about, write about, favour, and like the problem, the immediacy of the issue. And how does he bridge that?
Chris, can you tell us any more that you might have gleaned about the Burnham era?
Just picking up on that last point, we still await, don't we? At the moment, we're still at the sort of Christmas list of ideas. Most of which, like any Christmas list, will have people thinking, things that are appealing to plenty.
I'd like a pony.
Well, exactly. Yes, exactly. Well, it isn't quite like that, though.
I'm still waiting.
That's what I mean.
And it's a bit like that, and then all of the
chips and all the
all of the implications. Well, where's it going to be housed, and are you going to muck it out, and at what cost?
Nah.
So, and you magnify that a lot.
Just to be clear, we're not getting a Downing Street pony. That's a metaphor.
And we still don't know about Axel the dog. That's my big question.
No, this remains an unanswered question.
I reckon Axel's going to stay.
The geography of Axel.
I saw Keir Starmer's cat, his personal cat, not the Downing Street cat, Prince, in his little cat box being put in a people carrier around the side of Downing Street when I. That's the first thing I saw this morning.
This is a pretty fundamental question. Has he actually moved in?
Is he going to move in?
Do we know that he's going to actually move in?
So that was on our list of questions, I can tell you, that we were going to ask him in the garden, and then they ran out of time. Okay. So we haven't.
Have we seen any moving vans?
We're talking about the man rather than the dog.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think Andy Burnham's going to use Downing Street like a travel-in, and the family are going to stay in Manchester. But I might be wrong. But also because his kids are grown up, so when we've had this previously, it's been different because they've had school-age children. But someone who is close to his family in the north of England, and I said, is his wife going to come and live in London? And they said, no chance. Right. But also she apparently sometimes comes to London for work, so
And also remember in like the distant past of like the Theresa May era, she'd go back to her house in her constituency on a Thursday night, and then we don't film her at church on Sunday. So it's actually, we've had a world where prime ministers have been not in this postcode for a couple of days a week.
Yeah, and some of them used to go to Chequers as much as they possibly could. So maybe he won't. Maybe he'll only use Chequers for state occasions, and he'll go to Manchester every weekend. We don't know.
When Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, he would often work out of the Treasury's offices in Darlington, which are just down the road from his constituency. So to what extent does Andy Burnham's Number 10 North firstly become a base that he spends more time at than predecessors have used, if you like, offices that you might say were vaguely in parallel? But then also, perhaps more important than that, or as importantly as that, is how much clout is put behind this rewiring of Number 10 and Number 10 North. Now, to a degree, that will depend on how much time Andy Burnham spends at Number 10 North, because that will send an indicator to the whole system, whether it's somewhere that's attractive for civil servants to want to work in, depending on the time that the Prime Minister allocates to being there and the face time that they get with him. But that, alongside any other rewiring that goes on between Number 10, Number 10 North and the Treasury, and all of that will flow once we get the names, is going to be fascinating.
There's a very canny former official said to me, with this whole agenda of moving things out of Westminster, moving power, as he stood in the street a couple of hours ago and said, I will take power from this place to around the country, wherever you are. A very canny former official said, if all that moves is a small part of the Communities and Housing Department and a kind of remote office for Number 10, Whitehall will have pulled the wool over his eyes.
Right, so we've done it, but not really done it.
Right, so, and there is an argument, and this smart, wise owl was saying to me, look, there's a great argument in their view for moving transport, for moving bits of health, move the departments that are English departments, and you could have a model where essentially the UK departments, so Defence, Treasury, Foreign Office, they could be all staying here in Whitehall, and Andy Burnham could theoretically say, I really want those other departments to be out of town. But, I mean, do you really, when you're in a hurry, do you really want to embark on an absolutely giant reorganisation
and also because
like
redeploying
that?
people for their job costs money and time. You've got to consult them and things like that. It's funny hearing you saying you talking to a former official. I was cycling here this morning.
Loads more of them now.
And I said, and about to be loads of them. And I stopped at the traffic lights and started chatting to a guy who is a civil servant. And so I used it as a bit of a journalistic opportunity. And basically, they were saying this today boils down to three things for them. And I'm paraphrasing here. Does their current Secretary of State stay in the job, or is it a completely new person? What big reforms that they're already doing do they carry on with? And thirdly, what bits of their day jobs and their policy area can they devolve to the right level of government?
How long were the lights on red?
I mean, it was quite a big junction. And also
a couple of those points
a very
are
useful
really,
cycle ride.
A couple of those points are really key. I was chatting to a minister. They were still a minister at the time. Let's see if they still are within 24 hours.
Because the changes are happening now.
Just the other day. In fact, no, it was a couple of weeks ago actually, and they were saying, when it was obvious what was going to happen, they were desperate to get the tacit green light from Team Burnham about something that wouldn't be massively headline generating, but they wanted to plough on with. And they were fearful, unless they got that green light, there'd be a big pause button pressed in June that would remain paused until September or October, because it won't be in the first couple of dozen things that are crossing his desk. And the consequence, so feared this minister, is that some of those promises that they're attempting to deliver across a parliament right now could hit the buffers simply because there's this lag period where there wasn't a decision being made.
And also it'll be so interesting that because presumably this 10-year plan has to be formulated. Andy Burnham's not coming with it fully worked out in his head into Downing Street. So
he sort of acknowledged that though, didn't he?
But wouldn't there be a bit of a bun fight with the different, whoever ends up being in the cabinet, trying to get their things that they care about the most?
Yes.
Yeah. And so already like the kinder, gentler, more collegiate politics where he sets the direction and everyone rows and might get tested quite severely.
Get tested really quickly. But it's interesting, a lot of people who admire Burnham say that there's a sort of a misunderstanding of people, and as one of them said, he looks cuddly to the public but he's a hammer, right? And actually people who extol his virtues will say actually he can be incredibly persuasive but also not take no for an answer behind the scenes. Whether that translates into that building and the scale and gravity of the decisions that you've got to make in a completely different environment, we're just all going to live through finding out, aren't
And
we?
Andy Burnham said nothing about the rest of the world. Everything
No.
was about here at home.
Although he has spoken about President Zelensky this morning, and I think that's
Yes.
going to be his first phone call. So
He
yeah,
said-
he doesn't speak about it in the...
Faisal, just before we go, we've got to wrap up. We're getting kicked out. Tell me what the special administrative regime for water companies is, and whether that's
yes.
going to be very important this week.
Well, it's formally not nationalisation, but it's a form of legislated control for the government in the event that a important utility, such as is water, comes under financial trouble. And it looks fairly close to being enacted, but it looks
Thames
like
Water.
it will, in terms of Thames Water, it looks like it'll be enacted with some enthusiasm by the current administration. They've been sort of circling around a decision, and so it may be an early test case for this idea that you can, this intriguing idea, not of sort of, if you like, Corbyn, McDonald style nationalisation of broadband, remember that, but actually sort of greater degree of control over the essentials. Well, in that case, so that they can invest, but can you invest at the same time as keeping bills down?
Yeah.
These are the trade-offs that are now very real inside that building for Andy
And
Burnham.
we might even get some this week.
And we'll get some answers to.
And Chris, sorry to interrupt your texting, which I know will be important. I know that's not you just ordering your lunch because you've not eaten a single thing yet today.
It's just one of those days where if you
Someone's
don't look
tempting
at...
us with some chocolates.
I can hear
Dying.
sweetie wrappers being
Oh,
lined
yeah,
around.
come on.
Not before the
Nick
not
Hardley,
during
pass
the
them over, come on. It's Newscast, it's not the
These
news.
are branded
Let's all
sweets.
have a
Other
chocolate.
sweets are available.
Come on.
I'm just
Right, I'm going to have a
shot.
milk away.
And actually,
What
while
you want?
I haven't
they're
had any
Go on.
breakfast.
Thank you very much.
I haven't eaten.
This is the first thing I've eaten.
Don't ever say I
Should
don't
we
like
just do
apples.
should we do a little ASMR video? Whoa, there's the snacks. You always eat so
He was
badly on
tempting
days
us.
like
He
this.
knew we hadn't eaten
Thank you,
anything
Nick.
that
Thank you. Chris, what I was going to say is, I think you and I are going to reunite. I'm going to now fill until you've finished that mini Malteser. Or maybe it was I hope it was one that's very quickly chewed. What's the most dissolvable sweet? We're going to reunite tonight after tea time, about 7 p.m, because we think by then all the great offices of state will have been filled, which means we can reveal the winners of our great office sweepstake that people have been entering in their droves over the weekend to keep the kind of football spirit alive. But already a few people have quit as ministers. So Patrick Vallance, who was the science minister, he's quit, and James Timpson, who was hired by Keir Starmer with great fanfare to reform our prisons, he's decided not to stay on with
two
this
people
new
who were
lot.
brought in by Keir Starmer with deep specialism in their area.
You ate that sweetie very
I
quickly.
didn't
Well
eat it
done.
too quickly, to be honest.
Sugar rush.
Yeah, two people who were brought in from outside of, if you like, conventional party politics, in both prisons and science, respectively, who it would seem clearly had a sort of direct loyalty to Keir Starmer's government and didn't want to carry on in the next one. I was quite surprised we didn't have a few more of those moments actually in the last 24 hours. There are one or two people I hear wandering around Parliament rather casually dressed who were previously occupiers of pretty
And I saw
significant
that Ed Miliband was doing
ministerial
a
offices.
big speech in his department, laying out all the achievements of the last 2 years, which people are interpreting as a I'm not going to be here at the end of the day thing.
Yes.
We'll see.
Yes. Did you enjoy your sweetie?
I haven't eaten
Oh, you
it
haven't
yet.
eaten it yet?
I'm not going to eat in front of a camera.
Such a
I'm not going to
professional.
eat in front. What do you think this is? Talking about Ed Miliband. They say you're not going to eat on camera. No.
Right, okay, you're clearly starving and want to eat that sweet, so who am I to deprive you? So, Chris, thank you very much.
See you later.
Faisal, good to see you here in Downing Street.
Cheers.
And Laura, great to see you on a weekday.
It's always a joy and a
Reunited.
pleasure. Thank you, newscasters.
And as promised, we will be back with an extra helping of Newscast. That's me getting hungry now as well, where we will have an update on who the big offices of state are going to be filled by. But from Downing Street, that's it for Newscast for now. Bye-bye.